Every year at this luncheon, we have a keynote speaker. To introduce our keynote speaker for this year, I invite Mrs. Jo Hoy, the principal of Cardinal Ritter High School, up to the podium.
Good afternoon, Archbishop, Mickey Lentz, Margaret Hendricks, Mr. Plummer. It is an honor to be here with you all this afternoon to be able to introduce our keynote. And if you want some additional stories about her after the program, I would be glad to share some of them with you. Liz was born in San Antonio, Texas, to Tom and Leslie Miskovich. When her mom completed her term as nurse in the Army, they moved to Indianapolis, a place where Liz became her brother's shadow, and she was a little bit of a tomboy. While growing up, she liked to play outside in the creek, go swimming, and attempted at times to be girly by wearing her plastic high heels with her baseball hat on backwards. She attended Cardinal Ritter, graduated with honors, top 10 of her class, and after high school, she attended St. Joe's College, where she studied elementary ed and psychology. When she wasn't studying, she was active around campus as resident assistant. She was also a member of the campus ministry, and you could always find Liz hanging around with her friends. She graduated from St. Joe's in 2009 with a bachelor's degree, and after many interviews that summer, she was hired as a first-grade teacher at Holy Name, where she still teaches. She is also the super-dupervisor of the School Student Council and is an after-school tutor. She loves her job. She especially enjoys sharing adorable and innocent things her students do and say every day. She is definitely one of the funniest people I have ever known. Please help me welcome to the podium our very own keynote, Ms. Liz Miskovich.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. There we go. I am Liz Miskovich. Thank you, Mrs. Hoy. Thank you, Margaret Hendricks, Archbishop Tobin. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I think we're all here for the same reason. We have a deep appreciation for upholding the purity that is epitomized in the sacrament of marriage. But as Mrs. Hoy said, I'm Liz Miskovich, and I teach first grade at Holy Name in Beech Grove, so go Giants. But right now I want to take you all the way back to my freshman year at Cardinal Ritter High School. It was the fall of 2001, and it was one of my favorite places to be. I don't know if any of you Raiders can relate, but I loved it. It allowed me to do a lot of many things. I got to be social, which is something that comes very naturally to me. And my mom, she was not so social, so she decided to say, okay, Liz, before you get to do anything fun with your friends, you have to read this book. A what? I have to read a book? And it was called The Bride Wore White. And I thought she was crazy, and I read it anyway. Gotta do what your mom says. Well, at the time, I was 15 and boy crazy, and I thought she was off her rocker, but I read it, like I said, and could I remember what it was really about? No. I do remember the premise, though, and it's just as what the title portrays. It's about a woman who wears white on her wedding day, not to be cliche and do what all the bridal boutiques and all the bridal magazines say, but because she wanted to be seen as someone so pure who saved her sex life for her wedding, for her husband, as God intended. Well, little did I expect that silly old book was gonna play out significantly in the rest of my life. I was involved in a lot at Ritter. I played tennis, I ran track, I attended youth group, I was involved in student council, and as all of you, I was a mentor for A Promise to Keep. But my focus when I first started high school was not in any of that, but on the opposite sex, specifically upperclassmen. They had cars, they could drive me places. It was nice to see them in the hallway when they'd walk me to class or give me notes. But then one night I didn't feel so special anymore. At the time, I was a freshman dating a junior. He was a nice guy and he made me laugh. And we decided to go hang out with his friends at his house. The night was young, so it didn't seem like a problem at the time. But little did I know he had an ulterior motive. He wanted to take things to the next level, and I did not. And after telling him no and somehow getting out of it, I promised to never risk putting myself in a situation like that again. I didn't want anybody else to have to experience what I went through. It was so uncomfortable. So then Margaret Hendricks comes in, and she allowed me to use my loudmouth in a proactive manner. Just get you going. I began mentoring when I was a sophomore, and I thought of it like I think of teaching. Practice what you preach. If I wanted any of these kids to believe me, I had to live it out in my daily life. I still remember those 3 assertiveness techniques. I don't know which one of you in this crowd did the assertiveness talk, but that was me, so props. But anyway, number 1, say no, keep repeating it. Number 2, take the offensive. Number 3, refuse to discuss the matter any further, and if necessary, walk away. Well, I'm sure my dad would think that I use these techniques to ward off his request to do chores and stuff that I didn't want, but they actually came in handy more than you know. I began telling guys up front that I was saving sex for marriage. Most of them said, "Oh, I respect you for waiting," or "I admire how strong you are to resist temptation." And that was nice to hear, but it still wasn't easy. People would laugh at me, people would make jokes, sexual innuendos, and some people even called me the Virgin Mary. Well, guess what? The Virgin Mary is a pretty awesome woman, so I was totally okay with that. I mostly ignored the mean comments, and I went on doing what I wanted for my life. Who were these other people trying to tell me what to do? I was the boss of my life. I wasn't about to let other people control it, let alone pressure me to engage in sexual activities that God intended for marriage. Most of my friends at the time, or after, had experienced sex outside of marriage. I witnessed the heartbreak and the vulnerability that came after the relationships fell apart. These relationships lacked a foundation that was rooted in friendship and mutual respect for one another. They neglected to nourish their relationship with God being at the center of it. There was no intellectual or emotional connection. It was all physical. I didn't want that. I surely didn't want to waste my time with someone who wasn't on the same page as me. Then I went off to college. I'll be honest, I was scared out of my mind. I had been a part of my bubble, my little bubble. I knew everybody, I did everything, and it was just perfect for me. People knew who I was, and it was not a problem for me to remain strong in my virginity. But my mom was like, "Oh, Liz, you got this. Don't worry about it. You're gonna love it. I promise, I promise, I promise." Well, even though I still thought she was crazy for making me read that book, I believed her. Well, it didn't take long for me to realize that she was right. Praise God. It was a ton of fun. Oh my gosh, college is so much fun. I really miss it very dearly. No other time in your life can you run across the hall and tell your best friend something that only she'd appreciate. No other time in your life can you wake up from a nap, go eat dinner, go back and take a nap just to wake up for you to get ready for bed. No other time in your life will you encounter a compilation of hundreds, maybe thousands of different people who are completely different than you, but still very much the same. College is a blast, but it doesn't mean it's easy. College was the time in my life where I was really tested on following through with my promise. Not just with sex, but with many moral issues. There were no parents to tell me when to be home. There was no big brother to threaten to break the legs of my boyfriends. There was no theology teacher pounding into my head ethics and morality. The choice was up to me. Me. I was the one in control. Within the first few weeks of my college career, I had already made gobs of new friends and thought my classes were pretty easy. It didn't take me long to begin spending less time focusing on classes and more time developing a social life. I stayed up late visiting with friends, spectated at sports, got involved in intramural activities. I became more concerned about getting my name out there than about my academics. Well, I got my name out there. To my surprise, my peers had nominated me as homecoming princess. Woo-hoo. And I couldn't have been more thrilled. People recognized me enough to choose me out of the entire class. Sweet! This calls for a celebration. So, the night before the big game, I made contact with some older people whom I became friends with, and I asked them to hook me up with some alcohol. Obviously, I was underage. That didn't faze me. Remember, I was in control. I could do what I wanted. Nobody was there to boss me around. I was wrong. I stored everything in my refrigerator to chill it for later. Then my friends, who I was so concerned about developing a relationship with, decided to stop by. They came in and reeked of liquor and cigarettes. Not my idea of cologne, well, whatever. These were my new friends. I had to keep my cool reputation. Go figure, not 10 minutes later, did the head of residential life prance her tushy into our hallway and bust my room for alcohol. How did I let this happen? So much for being in control. I started letting other people push me to do something that wasn't my style, and I got it handed to me. Did I enjoy that homecoming? No. I had to be escorted, this princess had to be escorted to the game and escorted back to her room for the weekend. My mom and my grandma came the next day to support me, and I had to explain to them why I had to be escorted to a football game. Disappointment never hurt so badly. After that, I had to do community service on campus where all of my friends now saw me as a loser. I had to take a course on alcohol safety on Saturday mornings. One mistake, that's all it took. I spent the next 3 years working to overcome one silly mistake. Granted, there are bigger and far worse mistakes, but I had lost control. I'm the boss, if you didn't hear that at the beginning. I'm the boss, so how could I have lost my self-respect? How could I have forgotten to stand up for myself? How could I have lost sight of my goals? How could one mistake affect so much? During this time when I was trying to get back on track, I began paying more attention to my classes and schoolwork again. At the beginning of the semester, I was invited to participate in an honors course that was offered by the college. Maybe only about a dozen other people were invited to do this class. It was time for me to get back into gear with my academics. Every day I decided to plop down in the same seat next to the same guy, Steve. I always noticed his stickers on his computer and his buttons on his bag, and I'd be like, hey, I like your stuff. Hey, it looks good. And he'd look at me like I was crazy. And he'd grunt and snarl and glare, and eventually he'd be like, thanks. Whatever, the class went on. For the entire semester, I continued to sit in the same seat, and I'd make a lot of jokes during discussion. And eventually, Steve would start laughing at them, every one of them. It wasn't long after that when Steve and I started to talk more frequently outside of class. He was very accepting of me despite my alcohol fiasco, and he definitely appreciated my sarcasm and never put me in an uncomfortable situation. Being an advocate for my faith, I continue to go to church on Sundays and participate in campus ministry. I invited Steve multiple times while we were dating, and even though he was also Catholic, he would turn me down. I was persistent in inviting, and he was persistent in declining. This one difference brought